Okay, well, welcome everyone to our webinar. Good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast and good morning still to those on the West Coast. Today's topic is apprenticeships, a growing strategy for the childcare workforce. And we're very fortunate to have several real experts on this with us today. My name is Linda Smith, and I'm the director of the Early Childhood Initiative at the Bipartisan Policy Center here in Washington, D.C. For those of you who don't know us, we are a Washington, D.C. based think tank, tries to take the best ideas from both sides of the aisle to propose solutions to America's most pressing problems. And of course, as I say, one of our most pressing problems is childcare and getting the workforce back and getting the workforce we need in this growing economy. So what we're going to do today is talk about that workforce. As we know, childcare depends on our ability to recruit and retain a high-quality, competent workforce. We have had a major setback over the last few years with COVID, but even before that, over the last 10 years, the workforce has been shrinking to the extent that we have dropped from about 2 million in the early care and education workforce to a little over 1.6 million. Substantial loss in workers. And so how are we going to energize people, get them interested and back into this workforce? Because we all know that for parents to go to work, we need quality childcare. So one model that we've been looking at now for several years really is the registered apprenticeship model. And I'm going to ask our staff to put a link to the first webinar that we did on this was 3 years ago, where we looked at two webinars, one from West Virginia and another from Pennsylvania, where they had serious efforts. West Virginia's apprenticeship program is the longest running in the country. And the model out of Philadelphia was also striking to us in its design and well thought out pathway for our workforce. So what we're going to do today is continue to look at that. We'll post in the chat the latest report that we just issued this month, where we give many examples of where states and communities are using registered apprenticeships. We now know that in 2021, childcare and early education was one of the top 5 registered apprenticeships in terms of occupations in the country. So it's been growing. We have 35 states who have registered apprenticeships and 7 more states that are in the process of launching them. So a lot of interest, a lot of work going on, and we have a lot of expertise on this webinar. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn this over to Tara Williams, who is the Associate Director here at the Bipartisan Policy Center. She comes to us from the Maine Association for the Education of Young Children. Prior to that, she was a research and policy analyst at the National Council on Teacher Quality. And she herself has worked in this field for every age group, infants and toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergarten up to 3rd grade. So she has a lot of hands-on experience with the challenges of this workforce. She's going to walk us through what is a registered apprenticeship before we go to our field experts. So Tara, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Linda. We've really enjoyed learning about all of the local and state apprenticeship initiatives around the country as part of our recent report. We are going to be looking at, over the next few minutes, some of the key aspects of apprenticeship programs and the way apprenticeships have grown around the country in recent years. So apprenticeships are a workforce development strategy. They always include paid on-the-job training and related instruction. And historically, at the federal level, the word apprenticeship has been used interchangeably with the phrase registered apprenticeship. Next slide. So programs that are registered, meaning they are registered with a state or a federal office, always have these 7 components. They're industry-led. So the apprenticeship takes place in the industry in which you're training. If you're training in a childcare workforce apprenticeship, you will be doing that training in a childcare program. There's on-the-job training, and usually as part of that training, you'll have a mentor who really helps the apprentice with advising and supporting them throughout the process and throughout the program. The related instruction could take place in a variety of settings, including a community college, and it always includes wage increases. So an apprenticeship program is designed to align wage increases with increases in skills and knowledge. As far as diversity, when you're registering your program and applying for that, you'll show how you're designing the program to reflect the community in which you're operating. And related to quality and safety, you're showing in your application that this program is taking place in a program that is meeting health and safety standards. And the apprenticeship has been designed to be of high quality, to have rigorous training that prepares people to have the skills and knowledge and the competencies that they need in this profession. And then apprenticeships end with earning a credential. Very often it's a CDA, a Child Development Associate credential, and sometimes it's another type of state-approved credential or an associate degree. Next slide. Now, there are two federal laws related to apprenticeship that are important to know about. The National Apprenticeship Act passed in 1937, and this act, along with the rules established by the Department of Labor, really laid out some of the core components of an apprenticeship program, starting with some criteria for what makes an occupation apprenticeable, and then what are the standards of an apprenticeship program, how do you register it, and how do you set up an agreement. Next slide. More recently, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act passed in 2014. And with that, there's much more of a common definition and an outline of essential elements of career pathways. So this act, which is commonly referred to as WIOA, is really about establishing career pathways that match employers with workers. And registered apprenticeships are one of those pathways. The way it works is federal agencies partner to administer WIOA, and then states develop their state plans and often local plans. Workforce development boards then enact the plans. So they're identifying occupations that can receive funding. Registered apprenticeships can receive WIOA funding, but it would be a workforce development plan that would be making the decision about whether or not to provide that WIOA funding to their local childcare apprenticeship program. And if you received that funding, you could use it for the on-the-job learning or related instruction, as well as other supports like books and transportation that help make sure that apprenticeship programs are accessible. Next slide. So as we looked across the country, we found that as of June 2023, this year, 10 states were using the Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds to support their apprenticeship programs. One example is Maryland, where the Department of Education allocated $43 million from those funds for a grant initiative called Maryland Rebuilds. And $11 million of that was specifically designated for childcare workforce development. Now, the University of Maryland was one of 5 applicants that ended up receiving funding to develop apprenticeship programs for the childcare workforce. We found 13 states using federal PDG birth to 5 funds to start to plan, create, or develop apprenticeship programs. Oklahoma was one of them, where they included in their PDG strategic plan a partnership with the WIOA program that's under the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. We found 15 states that included apprenticeships in their most recent Child Care Development Fund plans. Some of those states were ones that had longer, more established, longer running established apprenticeship programs, such as Pennsylvania and West Virginia. We only found 5 states where some description of a childcare apprenticeship was included in their WIOA state plans, that Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act state plan. Those were Alabama, Connecticut, Indiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. Next slide. What we did see was great examples of collaboration and coordination with all different partners and communities. For example, in Oregon, their early childhood education apprenticeship was launched through a regional partnership with the Southwestern Oregon Workforce Investment Board, so their local workforce development board, as well as some community colleges and Head Starts. And there's a lot of great examples with Workforce Development Board coordination, as well as with community colleges. So in Wisconsin, their early childhood educator apprenticeship program is across 5 technical colleges in the state. And they've been partnering there for many years to develop and expand the apprenticeship opportunities for the childcare workforce. We saw many states and local examples where philanthropy really helped to get an apprenticeship program off the ground or to expand an opportunity that was already there. And Massachusetts and New Mexico were 2 of the places where philanthropy was core to a new program starting. As far as scholarships, there's some local and national partners that have been working on that. One of them is the Child Care Services Association and its Teach Early Childhood National Division. They worked with the U.S. Department of Labor to develop a national model where apprentices receive a Teach Early Childhood scholarship and mentorship while working towards an associate's degree. And Arkansas worked with them to launch a childcare apprenticeship just this year, and they have 5 other states working with them as well. Next slide. So in any of these cases, whether it's a local or state initiative, all of these registered apprenticeship programs are starting with these 5 key steps. And when you think about the childcare workforce, the program is going to think, is this going to be an apprenticeship for the full workforce? Are we really targeting it to childcare teachers in childcare centers or in family childcare programs? Maybe this is an apprenticeship for the childcare administrators, the directors and owners who lead the programs. And then the next step will be identifying potential partners and determining whether it's going to be an apprenticeship that leads to a credential or a degree. The program budget is going to need to be created that really includes all the essential costs, including those wage increases that come along with increased skills and knowledge. And then the program gets registered with the federal and sometimes, depending on where you live, with a state agency. And you can launch it once it's approved. Now, a registered apprenticeship program has to get funded. You need funding from somewhere. And you can pursue federal, state, local, or private funding. And so some of those key questions in a new program is to really look around and see what type of funding and what level of funding is available and what components of your program will it fund. Next slide. There's some key challenges that can come with starting up programs. We saw examples of places where startup funding was the largest hurdle, but then there's also the need to be able to sustain the program and funding needed if you're going to grow it or scale it up. And the wage increases often come up as the tricky piece of figuring out how you're going to fund that component of the program. We also were able to look at some specific opportunities from the data that we found. So childcare workforce development could be in all WIOA state plans. We could have more of the childcare workforce needs integrated into our workforce boards, into their policies and their investments. And we could see some more engagement in some places from businesses and philanthropy. And so there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of opportunities.
Okay, well, thank you, Tara, for that. Hopefully that was a good introduction for people. And obviously, we want to encourage you, if you have more questions before we move on, to be sure to put your questions. You can put them in the live chat on the YouTube function or on Twitter using hashtag BBC Live. So towards the end of the session, we will be taking questions from the audience, and I'm sure by that time you'll have some. We want to move on next to Pam Shaw. Pam is the Director of Strategic Funding and Partnerships for the YMCA of East Bay outside of San Francisco, California. She has extensive experience in implementing programs, professional development, and managing multiple funding sources, and is known for her innovation. I like to say that Pam is probably the model of braiding and blending in this country. If there's anyone out there that can answer questions on that, it's Pam. She's worked in early childhood now for over 40 years as a teacher, administrator, trainer, and director. So Pam, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Linda. She's just saying I'm old. What can I say? I don't see the slides coming up. Yeah, thank you. So next slide, please. So we are a social service organization. Most of you know YMCAs. Many people think about us as gyms, but our program operates a very large childcare program. We've been in business since 1903, a Head Start grantee since 1972, California Department of Ed state subsidized childcare provider since 1982, and Department of Social Services as well now. We are funded to serve 1,800 low-income children and families in 4 counties, 2 of which are in the East Bay and very urban, and 2 of which are about an hour and a half away, and they're very rural, including a migrant program. We've operated an early educator apprenticeship since 2015. So why did we start doing an apprenticeship? I mean, we looked at what we needed, which is exactly what Tara was talking about. Our program was expanding. We couldn't find people, particularly to work with babies. We had an early Head Start childcare partnership grant, and we got a little bit of extra training money, and we were able to put a group of Head Start parents to work. They would work in the mornings and take classes in the afternoons. And by Friday, it was mandatory tutoring and other training. And they did their 12 units in 1 semester. That was a little too fast. And we kind of made people a little bit crazy when we did that. And so we needed to slow it down. And then over the last few years, we've really worked on perfecting this model. We are sponsored by ESEPS, Early Childhood Education Pathways to Success. We are both sponsored and they are intermediary. And I don't know if we're going to talk more about intermediaries later, but for us, this has been great because we created our model together since we started before ESEP started. They do all the paperwork with the Department of Labor and the California Department of Apprenticeship Standards, so we don't have to really worry about that. And that's been really helpful, and file all the paperwork and come up with the standards and do all of the things that help us focus on the program itself and not on some of the administrative tasks. For us, we offer parents on-the-job training and work. For us, it's an opportunity for incumbent staff to finish degrees. This is really important. Before we started this apprenticeship, people were taking 10 years to get an AA degree, and that just doesn't work. People burn out and they get tired and they don't want to finish. So we're really looking closely at our degree completion because we do both degrees and credentials or permits. We do cohort learning experiences. I'll talk about that in a minute. And it's no cost to participants. Next slide, please. We have a 3-tiered structure where we start with an associate teacher permit. This is an entry level. It's 12 units of early childhood coursework at a local community college. The classes are actually now all online. We continue to do online even after COVID because it seems to work. If people need in-person classes, we make that arrangement for them. They wind up with a permit from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing and a full-time job, and they get a big salary increase once they finish the 12 units. Our associate teacher is comparable to the CDA, and it allows people to be eligible to work as a teacher in early Head Start as well. The teacher cohort is for current staff and partner staff, and they work on their AA degree and also get permits, a teacher or master teacher permit. And tier 3, which is the carrot that drives the program, is people getting their BA degree, and they get a site supervisor or program director permit. All the permits are issued by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and are required for people working in state-funded programs. Next slide, please. In addition to the hard skills work, meeting the California early education competencies developed by the state, we do job readiness and soft skills training. The soft skills training is critical because we're training parents, and there's some boundaries when you start as a parent and then you become a professional. And it's like, well, in my classroom, they didn't do it like that. And you're learning something different. You're matching what you're learning in a classroom academically to what's happening in the actual field, and you're doing it at the same time. For us, that's been really important. And the digital fluency piece is also incredibly important. And we strive for work-life balance, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of life that happens, especially since COVID kicked in. So our staff was greatly impacted, as were our apprentices, as everybody else. Next slide, please. We have an approach that is very comprehensive, very community-based, and very centered on the apprentice and the community. We do a cohort learning community with smaller classes. The community colleges can go up to 40 people in a class. We try and keep ours at 25, sometimes up to 30, but we really try and keep it at that 25 place. Diverse and inclusive. We try and have instructors that look like our participants. which are 95% women of color. We're trying to attract more men. We're trying to attract more youth. We are starting a big youth apprenticeship this year that we're really excited about to try and get high school kids actively engaged in this process. So by the time they graduate high school, they'll have completed that associate teacher permit. We do a 2-generation approach. There's childcare offered when they're taking classes, when there's tutoring, when there's study groups. We can't do this alone. The community partnerships are what make this program work. And we work with 5 different community colleges, 2 four-year colleges. The individualized support and the tailored approach are hand in hand. Our success coordinators are the cheerleaders that make the program work. Next slide, please. We pay for basically everything. This is completely no cost to any of the apprentices, and you'll get copies of the slides, so I'm not going to read it to you. Next slide. The on-the-job training is linking theory to practice. There's mentoring and coaching, as was said earlier. And, I talked about the community-based courses. When we do live courses, they're usually at one of our childcare centers, so we can offer childcare as well. Next slide. The impact, we've had over 500 participants, 459 graduates. We have about 150 people taking classes every semester. Next slide. We have public, private, and employer-supported funding. And one of the things we're looking at this year is shared service agreements with other employers. So we have, say, one success coordinator for 2 or 3 different agencies. We're looking at our mentoring piece and how we can share those resources as well. Next slide. And then what are we doing this year? We've got 10 cohorts. We've got shared service agreements, joint funding opportunities, a network of success coordinators that we're working with ESEPs to develop. We're looking to expand and enhance our mentoring and continue the public-private partnership for funding, which we'll talk about later. Next slide. Where's that bit? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, so much to learn from Pam. I think when we talked to Pam, it was over an hour and we could have kept going for a much longer than that. So she has so much to share. I want to move on now to our next speaker, Emily Chirac. Emily is the, wait a minute, I'm out of sequence, or am I?
I think Dolores next.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped over it and I apologize for that. Want to move on now to Dolores Talbadar. And Dolores is the director of the Rhode Island Child Care Training Program of SEIU Education and Support Fund. She's worked in a number of education and youth organizations, including 360 High School, Breakthrough Providence, and the Urban Institute. She has facilitated numerous talks before a very diverse audience, and she works with mostly in this project family child care providers in Rhode Island. And I think this is what is so unique about this program. It is one that is entirely focused on family child care. And I know that oftentimes that comes in as a second, but not in the program that we're going to hear about from Rhode Island. So Dolores, why don't I turn it over to you?
Thank you, Linda. I'll just wait a second for the slides to appear. So yeah, my name is Dolores. I'm the director of the Rhode Island Child Care Training Program for the SEIU Education and Support Fund. Next slide. The SEIU Education and Support Fund, or ESF, is a national nonprofit organization. We are allied with the SEIU Labor Union, which is why we have SEIU in our name. Our mission is to provide education and training programs that empower workers, raise standards, and promote high-quality jobs. So one of our key strategies to do that is registered apprenticeship. We're very proud that the registered apprenticeship program for family childcare in Rhode Island is the first in the nation. Last year, we were recognized with the Innovation in Apprenticeship Award from Building Futures, which is a technical assistance provider as well as an apprenticeship organization in Rhode Island that also serves as the state's intermediary for non-traditional apprenticeships. Next slide. So we've heard a lot about, what apprenticeship is, why it's important. For family childcare in particular, it is important because family childcare educators are essential workers. They're the workforce behind the workforce. And yet even within early childhood education, they're marginalized within policy conversations around how to strengthen the early childhood education workforce. Our program in particular emphasizes the great value of peer leadership. So educators supporting other educators. The reason why this is particularly important for family childcare is because they are solo entrepreneurs. They're small business owners. In general, it's a very isolated profession. And so anything that we can do to integrate peer leadership and peer mentorship will just support their ability to feel connected and to have longevity in their careers. Next slide. So our journey to develop our registered apprenticeship for family childcare began in 2019 in just understanding what were the conditions, who were the partners that we had at the table, and how could we start to imagine a registered apprenticeship for this workforce when it had not been done before. We did receive some initial funding from HCAP and from the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. And then we started to connect with our partners to align on shared goals, build trust and knowledge. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, but that didn't stop us from still working to design our standards. And then in November 2020, we finalized the program, registered it with the state of Rhode Island. And then subsequently, we were able to secure state funds from the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. We were able to hire a full-time coordinator. And then we officially launched in 2021 with our first cohort. And to date, we have had 25 registered apprentices and 7 graduates. 2 more are about to graduate. So we're a smaller program than the California program, but we are still mighty, and we're really excited for the path that it paves for other potential programs for family childcare. Next slide. So there are 4 primary components to our registered apprenticeship. There's governance, related training and instruction, rate increase, and journey workers. So just the headlines in terms of how the program is structured. Apprentices must complete a total of 144 hours of job-related instruction, including the CDA credential. Apprentices must advance in the Rhode Island QRIS system, which is called Bright Stars, from 1 to 2 stars. It's a 5-star level system. And apprentices are also eligible to receive up to 25 hours of prior learning credit from training completed within the 24 months preceding their program start date. Next slide. So governance. This was really the toughest nut to crack when it comes to designing a registered apprenticeship program for family childcare, because as I mentioned before, the family childcare educators are both employers as well as apprentices. So the way that our governance structure is set up is that ESF serves as the program sponsor. We have a joint apprenticeship training committee that is comprised of ESF as well as representatives from 3 other entities. And then together we're responsible for ensuring that the program is implemented with fidelity. So we have a family childcare educator who represents the employer. We have a representative from the Department of Human Services, which serves as the regulatory agency that regulates the state's child care subsidy program, CCAP. And then we also have a representative from SEIU 1199 New England, which is the labor union under which family childcare educators who participate in CCAP are members. And we also have received technical assistance from Building Futures, as I mentioned in the past. And without them, we would not have standards. We would not know how to do any of this. So they are very much in the picture as well. Next slide. The second component is our related training and instruction, or RTI. So apprentices can theoretically begin the apprenticeship within any of the RTI courses. So their participation is very much, they have an individualized pathway to complete the program. Ideally, they would begin with the Child Development Associate just because it's the biggest lift. It's only offered twice a year through the Community College of Rhode Island, but they can really begin at any stage. And then typically the ending is that apprentices must submit their application for their QRIS level increase before program completion. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, we utilize family childcare educators as journey workers. Any family childcare educator who's already completed their CDA, has already achieved level 2 in Bright Stars, and has completed our in-house Juntos Podemos, or it means Together We Can in Spanish, peer mentorship training, is eligible to be a peer mentor. Next slide. And then because all CCAP family childcare educators are covered under the collective bargaining agreement between SEIU 1199 New England and DHS, the wage increase is built into their contract. So as soon as a family childcare educator earns their second star in the QRIS, they are eligible for a wage increase. Next slide. And then finally, just to kind of wrap it all up, one thing that is really critical to our program is that we have equity supports that go through all of our program components. So in Rhode Island, the majority of family childcare educators are Spanish speaking. So all of our related to training and instruction, all of the mentoring, all of the staff that support the family childcare educator apprentices are Spanish speaking. We offer anti-racism curriculum as one of the recommended courses to support their work in building a high-quality program. All materials are also available in Spanish, and simultaneous interpretation is always available. So that's our program.
Wow, that's fantastic. I think we're going to have a lot of questions for you. I can see it. I can see them starting to come in. Now I am going to move on to Emily. Emily, I didn't mean to give you a heart attack earlier, so that you would be using somebody else's slides, but I want to introduce Emily Chirac. She is the Associate Vice President for Bank Street Education Center at Bank Street College of Education in New York City. She leads the center's policy portfolio, including the Learning Starts at Birth and Prepared to Teach initiative. She spent over 20 years working in education policy, leadership, and administration. And as she will tell you, Bank Street just completed a survey and issued a report, which she is going to hopefully tell us a little bit more about. So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here, and I am really honored to be part of this panel of such impressive leaders in the field. Thank you, Dilari and Pam, for your incredible presentations, and to you, Linda and Tara, for the invitation to join today. It's a wonderful opportunity to highlight the importance of apprenticeships, so thank you. As part of my work at Bank Street, as Linda mentioned, I spearhead our Learning Starts at Birth initiative, which is devoted to strengthening investments in early childhood and specifically in the workforce. Our goal in doing that is to develop higher quality systems, programs, and policies that bring more investment, but also strengthen quality and achieve equity. And so I say that because our work is a little different. We are not running one program, so I'm going to take a little bit more of a bird's eye view and share with you more about our sort of work more globally. So why apprenticeships for Bank Street? We really believe that the growing interest in investment in apprenticeships for early childhood is a critical opportunity and provides a space to also learn from Bank Street's approach to educator preparation in early childhood and beyond, to strengthen some of the components required of programs like the job embedded learning, mentoring and coaching, and other sort of cornerstones of the apprenticeship model. We know that all of those components need to be done well if they're going to really make a difference and enhance the ability of educators to deliver more meaningful experience. Pushing credentials on folks is not going to change stuff in and of itself. They have to be high quality pathways. And I appreciated all of the comments from Pam and Dilari about how accessible they need to be for the existing workforce as well as the new workforce if they're going to really make a difference. And importantly, or critically, I should say, I would be remiss if I didn't add that I am also enthusiastic about apprenticeships because I think they provide a really solid pathway to real pay parity for the workforce. And we know that that is the most critical lever for making a real change in our field. And I will say that can't all fall on the shoulders of the programs, which is somehow the way in which it's currently designed. So that's something we need to think about later as we talk more about systems change and opportunities there. So over the past several years, we have convened what we called a community of practice for 41 apprenticeship leaders across 32 states. And through those convenings, it became clear that there's really not a sort of system of intentional support for apprenticeship programs. Administrators were really eager to learn about what was happening across the country. Some folks didn't even realize that they weren't the only folks running such a program, and that there really is a new sort of momentum and an awareness in the field, and these models are growing. So an opportunity to come together was incredibly valuable. And as we learned more about programs through that engagement, we also realized how varied the approaches were across states. Despite the fact that there is this sort of checklist of requirements for registered programs, they all were designed a little bit differently. So we undertook a small sort of research effort and released a snapshot recently that I think we'll put in the chat for you shortly, that sheds light on how apprenticeship programs across the country are structured and offers just some very initial insights into ways in which we think they could be strengthened, and importantly, the conditions and supports for apprenticeship programs could be strengthened across the country. So what did we find? 70% of the programs surveyed offered a CDA, which is currently, as we know, the most common entry-level requirement. There was real momentum, as many folks know, before the pandemic to chart a more aggressive course towards higher credential attainment for the workforce. But the realities, I think, of the workforce shortage, and of course, the challenges that educators faced during the pandemic just didn't create as much time, appetite, opportunity, funding for additional pathways. And so we really saw the majority of programs, new and existing, focusing on the CDA requirement, which of course is aligned with where policy is right now as well. 90% of the survey respondents had at least 4 or more partners involved in their program, including a mix of community colleges, intermediaries, foundations, employers, Department of Labor, and other state agencies. Most programs had a community college partner, and if they didn't, it was because they were focused on a CDA, which of course doesn't require, a higher ed partner. 80% had partners which included training intermediaries, that could provide additional capacity around workforce. But overall, there was a huge range in terms of partnership mixes and types, which I think speaks to how creative and responsive many locally based programs have been, but I think also raises an important management and funding issue. Managing a program across so many partners requires time and skill, and therefore resources. And I don't think that was accounted for in the funding that we saw across programs. This is a big administrative lift, and it's an important one because there's many advantages in having those cross-sector partnerships, but it is a significant lift for program leaders. Funding sources were also varied. I think it was notable there that 60% of those who we talked to were not receiving funding from the Department of Labor or related workforce funding, which is a huge missed opportunity. And I think, Tara, you spoke to some of that earlier in your comments as well. So overall, I would just say this lack of sort of consistency, I think, points to sort of a lack of systemic support for apprenticeships. Again, incredible work happening in different ways in different communities, but not a lot of attention to how we want to codify or scale some of these quality approaches. And I think that would be an opportunity that we could think about as we look to grow the field. As part of our research, we also took a close look at mentoring, which is really important, again, because this is sort of part of Bank Street's real focus around reflective practice. And I think, again, a lot of strengths here, but also a lot of room for growth. In about half of the programs surveyed, site directors or owners filled the role of mentors, which isn't optimal given the varied and demanding role that those folks play. Many programs face challenges recruiting mentors. And a strength, many have at least required some training for mentors, which we think is important because just because you're a strong educator doesn't mean you're going to know how to do the work of a mentor. So again, a lot of opportunity, I think, for us to sort of learn from the field and build from the strengths to create some more models for replication. So with that, I'll just close by saying that we are recruiting and just finished actually accepting our first cohort into an action research fellowship that's designed to support program leaders from across the country who are interested in tackling some of these areas for development to strengthen their existing approaches and develop some innovative models that can be used to share with the field. And so we're hoping in about a year to have gone through that action research process with 10 programs from across the country and to be able to share some of those insights with the rest of the field. So thank you very much for having me, and I'm excited to talk more in some of our discussion shortly.
Yes, and boy, we are getting questions in, and I want to start with one for all of you. And I know that this, you each alluded to it in some ways. The question of startup, I think that is a real challenge for people to just think about, we want to start one of these programs, where do we begin? Can you, Dilari and Pam, can you talk a little bit about where, I know Pam, it's been a while, but how did you really just start? What made you think about this? And then where did you go for the startup funds?
I mean, so for us, we were really lucky. We had some extra training money from the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Grant. So as part of our federal money, it was a one-time only pot of money. It was $250,000, which is enough to get a small program started. And within a year, you're all going to think I'm spoiled by this, but we got $1 million grant with SEIU that our staff are represented by through the California Apprenticeship Initiative. And that was a 1.5-year grant for $1 million. We got little pots of money from all other different sources, including, Dilari mentioned, HCAP, which helped us, a little piece here and then another piece there. We have our fairy godmother is the, CEO of First Five in Alameda County, and she believed in us and hooked us up with TANF money. So within the first couple of years, we were using TANF dollars, and not on an individual basis, but as a cohort. And that's highly unusual to be able to do that. And that's, one of the challenges in the money is that it's like a WIOA money is individually driven. So it's hard to use WIOA money to start up a program. But generally speaking, most of our programs have started through grants, and we've managed to keep them going. I think the problem is when people get grants, they can't sustain it. And so you really have to have a strong sustainability plan if you're going to start with a one-time only grant.
Dilari, how about you on that?
Yeah, we were lucky to be partnered with HCAP, the Health Career Advancement Program, which is a labor management organization that works with healthcare workers. And they had been designing apprenticeships for years in the healthcare industry. So we were really lucky to be able to not just learn from their model programmatically, but to receive financial support from them. And in addition, in Rhode Island, the Governor's Workforce Board had a grant opportunity specifically around designing apprenticeships. So it was a situation where the opportunity was there, and so we just kind of grabbed it. And that's what supported our initial startup. And then in Rhode Island, the Department of Labor and Training has an initiative called Real Jobs for Rhode Island. And the mission and the vision for Real Jobs for Rhode Island is completely aligned with the objectives of registered apprenticeship. So we've been really lucky to receive full funding from the Rhode Island DLT through that initiative to keep our registered apprenticeship going, and not just keep our registered apprenticeship going, but actually expand to create a pre-apprenticeship program, which is for individuals who are brand new to the family child care world and want to become licensed family child care educators. And then what that does is it creates a pipeline for registered apprentices, because that registered apprenticeship program is for incumbent workers.
Emily, we have a question that comes in for you, and it's, are employers broken up by size? And it says, I'm curious about the number of small businesses that participate, assuming that there's probably more challenges for small businesses to do that. And maybe not, you might argue on that.
I'm not entirely clear on the question. I think there are a number of different types of employer partners that apprenticeships can match up with. usually they are at the table as part of that design of the program. And so there is an opportunity for them to inform kind of what their needs are as the program is designed and developed. And they also serve as the agency hosting apprentices and offering mentoring. So this is really a program design that's in close partnership with employers and could be designed with different sizes in mind. I do think we need to be mindful, and Dilari has obviously a lot of insight in here, given the focus of her program on family childcare, but how different this needs to look in a family childcare setting than in a center-based program. And so I think one of the examples I pointed to earlier was how you structure a program of mentoring and coaching support in a very small setting is going to need to look different than how you approach that in a larger site.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a lot of adaptation we need to think about across that setting. I think family childcare networks provide one opportunity for that. Also, outside coaching is another structure to think about. So I think there's a lot of different innovations that we can consider to make sure that this works across our mixed delivery system.
One of the reason I was talking about the size of the business, and if I understand this question, is that smaller businesses are probably stretched pretty thin on staffing. And is it harder for them then to have their employees taken out or participate, et cetera? And I think that would be some concern about the smaller programs being able to handle this, but I could be misinterpreting what was asked. A lot of kudos, Dilari, on the family childcare, several shout outs on how great it is that family childcare is being included. And questions, a fair amount of questions about the pay issue. And I think, can you just spend a little bit more time clarifying how family childcare providers, there's one comment in here about them paying themselves, so to speak. So how does that work when it comes to them being a sole, they're self-employed?
Yes. So, as I mentioned before, all family childcare educators who participate in the state's childcare subsidy program, CCAP, are covered under the collective bargaining agreement between SEIU 1199 New England and the Department of Human Services. So if you're a family childcare educator and you even serve one child who is eligible for CCAP, then you are covered under that contract. So the wage increase is relevant for the children that you serve. Well, the wage increase is relevant for your reimbursement rate for the children that you serve who participate in CCAP. And so that reimbursement rate is set and regulated by the State Department of Human Services and codified through the collective bargaining agreement. So it's that reimbursement rate that is in the most recent collective bargaining agreement. There's now complete alignment between advancement in Bright Stars and whether a family childcare educator can earn that increased wage. So once you advance in Bright Stars, then you are eligible for a higher reimbursement rate, and that reimbursement rate is based on the age and number of children that you have in your program.
And is that all children in the program or just those in the subsidized part of the program? I think that's
so right. So if I'm a family childcare educator, I can have some children whose families are private pay families, so they are paying based on my private pay rate. And then there are some families that for whom I get paid directly from the state, in addition possibly to a copay. So that reimbursement rate is only applicable to those children whose families participate in CCAP.
one thing that has come up early on, and I think this isn't a really legitimate question, are articulation agreements. And how has that worked in both Rhode Island and in the PAM in the work that you've done?
The colleges have articulation agreements. The community colleges have articulation agreements with the four-year colleges. And right now we're working on high school agreements with community colleges. So the old 2+2+2 back in the ROP days. We're starting to look at that now and creating agreements. It's not in place yet. So an articulation agreement is an agreement on the coursework that you take and that it's accepted at the next level so people don't have to repeat coursework or training.
So that's
And
all been resolved in your
no, we're working on it now for the high school kids. For the community colleges, there's a system in California that's already in place. So we already know. For us, it's more about sequence of classes because the community college has their way of doing things. And as an early childhood professional, I don't find that that's the most engaging way of doing it. I don't want to start somebody with theory. They'll get turned off and they won't want to stay in the program. I want them to start with a community class about themselves, all about like how they were as kids. And that engages people quickly. And what we're finding is that when we do it different sequence than maybe the community colleges have chosen to do it, people stay engaged a little bit longer. Like we don't want to dump them right into heavy theory classes and reading, particularly people who haven't been in school in a long time. They're already scared to death to go back to school, a lot of people. And, you know, they've got kids at home or they haven't had a good, successful educational background. So it's really important to do, you know, training and engagement from the beginning and make sure the coursework matches that, what we want as an outcome.
I would say this is a critical question for all new programs to consider, especially if they're focused on the CDA. Those credits must have a pathway towards an AA or a BA, or not really addressing the systemic social justice issue in our early childhood workforce. Colorado recently passed a law that mandates 5 gen ed courses are accepted by every community and state college in the state. That's like one example of a policy shift that can support some of these matriculation opportunities. But Pam, I think your comment also made me think of the importance of loan forgiveness and financing. A lot of folks have had 1 or 2 credits here or there in their history, maybe don't have those fully paid for, and it creates an incredible barrier for going on to higher education. So these are the kinds of access, program components that folks really need to think about in the design of these kinds of pathways if they're going to have full reach and broad reach.
And California actually has a funding source that allows colleges to apply directly for state funding for people taking classes in a registered apprenticeship. And that's been amazing. But getting all the colleges to do it the same way is a bit of a challenge. So about half our colleges are figuring it out. The other half, we're figuring it out with them.
Another thing there, Linda, sorry, if I can add one more, is credit for prior learning. I think that's another piece we need to think about. When we talk about apprenticeship programs, they're powerful for recruiting new staff to the field, but they're also incredibly powerful for the existing workforce who has not had opportunity to credentials for so long. And they have a lot of experience and a lot of strengths. And I think we need offering more mastery-based pathways for folks that have learned a lot on the job, and give them some credit for prior learning and come up with different ways of assessing that and providing credit. And, or this makes me think back obviously to the pathways question, credits from other institutions, right? And how that sort of plays in and being more flexible. And I can say that coming from a higher ed perspective, to offering those credits and giving people a chance to kind of move along and not get discouraged, as Pam said as well.
Another, I think, quick question here. There was a question early on about the applicability to school age. Obviously, we're talking about birth to 5 for most of what we've discussed today. Do your programs also accommodate the school age after school population? I guess looking at Dulari.
Yeah, family child care educators take care of school age children.
Pam, I'm assuming yes.
So to some extent, our focus is on early childhood in our programs, but we've had school age people take classes with our people, and particularly in our own school age programs. So yeah, but there are apprenticeships starting now that are focused exclusively on school age workers now.
Okay. I think that, you know, the other thing that we got a couple of questions about, there's no difference in the training that you would give to ordinarily to early Head Start childcare someone working or in the partnerships. Am I assuming that to be true? There was a question about, is there any difference?
Yeah, for us, there is. They're required to take infant toddler development, which is not a required course. And for us, they have to take it in their first 12 units. So they're ready to go at the end of the year. And that's
Okay.
not how the colleges, again, it's a sequencing issue. So it's not a required course at community colleges to take infant toddler development. And for us, it's a required course to finish your 12 units towards your associate teacher permit. So yeah. So they're fully qualified to work in an early Head Start program or early Head Start childcare partnership.
Either or.
Licensing requires 3 units of infant toddler development in California if you're working with babies. So it helps a lot.
And how about in Rhode Island, Delari? Anything different there?
I really can't speak around early Head Start. It's not an area of expertise for me.
Okay, so I think there's some other questions about how this works, and I see that we're really running out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. Some more questions about wages. Obviously, a lot of interest in how it works with the wage issue and getting the wages up. The issue around quality rating systems and how does this blend in with those, and I think we can probably do a whole nother session on those two things. But I do want to kind of summarize for sort of the things that I think started us looking at the apprenticeships to begin with. And I think I kept hearing a few words over and over in the conversation today. And I think that you know, the apprenticeships get to the heart of a lot of the problems that we have with our workforce in early childhood. And the first word that you all kept saying is pathway. We need a pathway for our workforce to get from wherever they are, whether it's high school or AA or a CDA, whatever that is, we need that. And I think if we have not seen that in the apprenticeship program, you know, I don't think we're going to see it anywhere because it is so well laid out. Competency, and I heard you all say that over and over again. And I think, Pam, you said that a little bit, and Emily, you did too, in terms of it is not just about knowledge, it is about competency. And these apprenticeships give us both. And I think that stood out for me. They apply to existing and new workforce. And I think that's the other thing that we have for too long been in an either or. Either we invest in the workforce we have or the workforce we need. And I think these apprenticeships basically do both of those. And then obviously the link to wages and how we work that out. I think there are still challenges, as we know, but having the structure and the requirement to link these improvements and this progression to some kind of a wage increase is putting us on the right pathway back to that earlier word. So I think we're out of time now, but I do want to thank you all so much, Emily, Delari, Pam, and Tara. Excellent conversation. We have a lot more questions. We'll try to pay attention to those as we continue to work on this issue. I would close by saying that we know that there is a lot of interest in Congress on both sides of the Hill in the apprenticeships and in the reauthorization of this. So for those of you who are out there and have an opportunity, invite people to see these programs, invite your Congress people, your public officials to see what's going on with these apprenticeships, because they are truly, I think, an inspiration to all of us to see what happens in them. So once again, thank you. And we'll hope to continue this conversation at some point in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.